really now?
Chilly crickets is all I can tell you. That's all I can say is chilly crickets. But not 100%. And that's going to be the important part. How many more, folks? How many more are going to step up? What example are you leading to have people fill in where you are working? Give them an idea where they don't have an idea. We've listened behind Woodshed quite a long time. As I've been talking through what we call the news, it's the notice to us. I just look at it as all the things that need to be fixed that we can each choose. As I said, I used to say, and I'll say it again, find your place on that rope that's attached to the edifice of power and start tugging. Find the thing along that, the tyranny that ties you up, grab onto it, find the thing that really irks you enough to make it right, the wrong that you need to right, and start tugging, and tugging until you're done. And it's amazing how many people will, it's not that many, but it's amazing that there's anybody else that would see it and need that example, that each one of us needs to at least step forward where we can. If I was to look at the whole entire battlefield, if you will, as I do, again, Battlefield America was not our discussion. That's been imposed upon us. And if you look at the entire battlefield, it's overwhelming. There's just not a way to do this. But the battles are fought everywhere we are, because the oppression is everywhere we are. And that's part of how it gets defeated. And so we move out of what I've been trying to get people to see. When I say read the black and white, that may be the last ability, that may be the last tool that we have available to us, is what has been written before, that those that want to invade our lands cannot change. And why I'm saying we needed to do that, and we do that, and you need to do that, is because that objective basis removes all opinion. And if you listen, if you pick up what I'm saying, when I tell you that certain things are outside of a judiciary, when they went extrajudicial, then it didn't matter, did it? We've always been able to resolve our problems on things that were never supposed to go before the judiciary anyway. In that, if you haven't heard me before say it, if you didn't know, where the NDAA was enforced, the memo told us that they went, the United States District down there in Washington went extrajudicial, and then the Supreme Court stepped up and walked away from their post to check that. That's essentially told you don't have a government. You don't at least have the government that you were told about in the Constitution. And I heard crickets. But not everybody. So I want to get right to that there are people, and it doesn't have to be an actual adult that needs to do this. You just have to have a mind for it. If something's just stopped making sense, and maybe someone's just asked a little bit more than they needed to know for what they do. With all the trappings of the costumes and the charade of authority, you let them assume an authority, and you allow that, you empower that. You give power where no power exists. It's really a fascinating dynamic, and it's that fast. Girl refuses embarrassing request from a teacher, but paid the price. And so there's a price in every war. There's a price. But count what that is, and maybe that's okay. A responsible straight-A junior high school student was an unlikely protester, but she stood her ground when her physical education teacher demanded she step on a scale in front of the class and record her height and weight for all to see. Ireland Hobart Hoke refused, saying she didn't believe her body measurements were anyone's business but her own, her mother's, and her doctor's. The teacher then sent the girl to the principal's office for not participating and arguing with the teacher about it. Now, won't go on and on about the story. You'll get it. There's a little video. If you listen to the video, listen very carefully. Again, as more people talk longer, you start finding out there's not very much substance behind what they're doing. They just didn't like it in the first instance. If you listen to what she was saying, they get down to the point where she doesn't really have a reason why it wasn't worthy of anybody else knowing her body weight. But see, that wasn't the argument either. What relevance does that all have to her really having physical education? What does that have to do with any of the education? And you understand, any of us that have been behind the woodshed any length of time know all that data is being compiled and given to the state and part of your record. Now, when I was listening to her, I was hopefully she'll keep plugging away at this, and she'll learn the more foundational discussion. I was happy to hear at a young age she was saying no, and apparently her mother is right there to help foster and encourage an idea of independence. And really, more importantly, what I try to get you to see behind the woodshed is the costume that comes under the authority, the way it comes at you, that you don't really realize it's a threat. In this case, it comes in the kindly old teacher. Oh, let's just, in physical ed, it makes all the sense in the world. We need to know your weight because we need to know your body to fat index. And that little one has no clue otherwise that this ties into a much bigger political governmental agenda. It also creates witness, if you will, the evidence. It speaks. It doesn't remain silent when you understand about child services sitting right behind this school, and this government school is just the agent of all that system of plunder, family destruction. Now, as I say that, I'm talking in generality. There are cases when there needs to be an independent, objective, unattached, impartial help for families. We're in a dire time in our society. There are times when that can be helped, but they put this thing in long before this system, this family system was put in, but long before any of this was really the big problem that it is, and in time to receive what the social engineering was driving our families into, which was essentially despair and economic destruction and making it very difficult, so that they would come in, and again, rights of child becomes it's a United Nations provision, and it was adopted. And it was what they call soft law. This is also part, for those of you that are all wrapped up in Agenda 21, these are all the parts. This is the soft law of family law predated Agenda 21 or the knowledge of it. But it's the same foreign law being brought in, and the Bar Association, who has allegiance with the International Bar Association internationally, who is it's also the advisor to the Holy See, and they're all advisors and legal representatives for the UN itself. This is all tied together. So how does a little one in a PE class know that her getting on a scale, it actually feeds data into a system that's going to witness against her and her mother and her father or whoever it is that's taking care of her at that time to fuel the demise eventually. And as we now see throughout the big data sphere called the internet, now the interwebs, whatever you want to call it, the programs they have for us to interject, like Facebook and Twitter and even now our emails, everything. It's all big data collection that they're building dossiers on everybody. It's almost too fantastical to think that it's going on, but there it is. Who would have guessed that all of this would come out of the simple offering of a gift? And to me, it really looked like I've never been involved in it, so I just have to go off the anecdotal statements to me. It's a drug dealer, what a drug dealer does, where you give somebody a little bit, you give them stuff for free, and now they're hooked. Eventually you get something that you give it to them until they're hooked, and that's how this whole thing works. Well, here we have all the crickets in the nation that should have stood up for the obvious invasion that the NDAA was, and the complete failure of the establishment of government, where the Supreme Court didn't step up to do justice or declare the law, where it was a definite question whether or not a limited form government can extend to stop looking at the law. In other words, go extrajudicial, and then eliminate international law, where you see it speaking to the not following the Lieber Code. You see this entity stepping up and saying, we're not going to follow any of this stuff. And the judges in this country were supposed to step up out of a sense of duty and justice to stop it, and they didn't. And they didn't do it when they were specifically asked to. They're part of it. So as we said, we've heard Cicero and then restated by Scalia, in times of war the laws fall silent. I told you that memo was the laws being forced into silence. There is none. And when you have no remedy in the law, you have no law. And that directly affects us, because now we get to the sense of property and the loss of the ability to protect it. So this little girl stands up and says, I'm not going to let you do that. Now, I don't know if she knows the bigger point. I'm telling you about the bigger point, because this is how they get us in every other thing. They talk about a little thing that we don't understand is connected to a much, much bigger thing. To me, it's almost, again, if we go to the Silent Weapons Quiet Wars document talking about the electronic circuit consistency, what you're looking at here, this little piece of information, it's almost like an input to a transistor of a bigger power system. This little bit of information that they're getting from all these students and to her eventually works into a big power system. And she fed it. She biased that circuit so that it would work. And if there was anything that comes out of the input of that that's wrong, that family gets taken out. And they use that evidence against her. So whether or not her information is not important. She stood up is the important thing. She apparently was, her mother talked to her about this so she could resist. And she could resist in the face of a secondary authority, so-called the principal. And there was and when you read the story, there's other pressure here. But when she made that example, other kids stepped up. All little goats stepped up to say, hey, yeah, I don't think that's good for me either. And this is what the example, I'm trying to tell you about the power of an example. And we have another power of an example, which I try to lead my life by. We don't talk too much because it seems to raise a lot of red flags. So we have examples that we can live by and that we can be. And I'm asking us to do that. And I'm asking us as we get behind Woodshed to learn those principles that we've kind of been engineered out of us a bit. We understand that they sit there to be powerful to work with us. So this girl steps up and says, I'm not going to even let you take my weight. None of your business. Like we put on our T-shirts for the miners. I put on T-shirts as a mineral estate grantee. We're mining our own business. Mining our own business. So the extension of that is, why don't you mine your own? And that's out there for us to do. So we each have our own job to do. Now, for those of you that are screaming and yelling because you understand the technicality, no, we're not in a business as a miner, but we're not talking about that part. We're talking about the idea. So we have to talk in a couple of places. We're really not that technically wired, as I keep finding out. As I was telling you a little bit last week about people who have heard these things and supposedly understand processes of law and the right and the obligation to remain silent and the necessity to do so, and then do so in a particular way. You learn all this. We hear hosts that are broadcasters that on and on and on about all they know and all that you're supposed to do, and then you hear them have to get involved and they don't do any of it. Too lazy. And that's a fact. I'm not even going to argue it. That's a fact. That's what happens. And so it's up to us now. That's why I say it's up to us to get beyond that. In a way, practice what we preach. And, that's an obligation for me as well. And, as best as I know to do, that's what I'm doing. And that said, stepping into it, I've been empowered. Again, there's not much behind the Woodshed, but there's just enough to do what we're doing. And that's the focus. My whole orientation in the world changed when I realized, really understood the battle that we've been in. We've been in, not since the NDAA, but we've been in for probably all of our lives. All the listeners on this broadcast, I don't care how old you are, we've all been underneath this oppression. And they did such a good job, we're still talking about it. And when they do something very, very detrimental, we're crickets in generality. We're crickets. So this young girl steps up, and I hear her mom speaking behind her because she doesn't have a whole lot of real solid support about why she did. She was just doing it. And I'll tell you, folks, if you have little ones in the school, you have to think about this, because they are now being used as witnesses against themselves. So I said, folks, just get your kids, your little goats out of school and start homeschooling them. There's just too much liability anymore, in lots and lots of ways. I won't move on all. Anybody behind Woodshed probably understands all this. So interestingly, how these things pull together and how people respond and send me things, and Twitter feeds go on, and behind a Woodshed is my Twitter if you want to check it out. I just send out little pieces of information throughout the week as I get my schedule works out. I can go look at Twitter and I can send stuff out. I send out little packets of information that I'm looking through that looks interesting to me. You can too. But remember, that's another point of big data. So they're taking, and the news is, and you know this, they're taking all this and they're building a dossier on what our interests are through all of this. So you're kind of taking a chance one way or the other. I'm more trying to be more behind the scenes, but at some point you have to have that supposed public face, and so I'm using that tool to advance the general pieces of information, hopefully that get people thinking more than anything else, give a more balanced view. Like we get a lot of the view. Well, I don't get any view from the MSM. Is that what it is? Mainstream media here in the States. I don't even get it. I mean, unless we go through the internet sites. So it's refreshing to go to people that live in other lands and see what's important to them from their news and see what the news is, because you can see if I had a doubt about what we're told in this country to keep us controlled and keep us moving in the direction that they want us to, or keep having us react the way they want us to react. You just have to go look around the world now. It's pretty fascinating. Really interesting insights out there. Big pieces of information that are really key to showing that, first of all, there's a different story, and that generally people aren't having it. But the limit is no one really knows what to do about it, actually. And so this can be a problem. If you take a problem that's too big and try to tackle it, it might be a problem. But that's why I've tried to reduce it down for everybody, give you the insight. Do local to you. Find a wrong local to you that's so wrong that you have to see it made right, and make it right, and just make it happen. And I'll tell you, though, there's a lot of organization against proper the movement, and what I would consider to be the proper way, where essentially it's, just do for your own and be left alone to do for your own, as long as you're not messing with other people. That seems to be good enough. But there's a lot of do-gooders out there that want to know your life and do for your life better than you know for yourself. So I don't know how that happens, but that's who these people are. And I'm reminded it's also the MSM is also the clap. You can go ahead and get the clap if you want, or the corporate lame ass propaganda. Or you can learn it on your own. So the Twitter I send out is information. Well, I get information that comes to me that I pick up, and I can't read. I don't know how people have 10,000 followers, are following 10,000 people on Twitter. I don't get that. I tend to be a little bit more private, where I like to respond if I can, or interact if I can with people. So I can only do a few at a time. So I don't have that many people I follow. But I also don't want to follow everybody else's followers, because they're sending me stuff they think that's important, and I kind of get their stuff from who they follow. So I tend to follow people that aren't following me, and that's kind of led to a little bit of a problem, because I don't get to see some things, but I try to pick it up. The point is, we have a lot of information going around quickly anymore. That's really a power if you start to use it that way. So I always find interesting how we have waves of a consciousness that go through, and I kind of watch that through the various, whether it's the emails or whether it's for me it's just Twitter. I don't do Facebook. I won't do anything. I don't do Google. None of that stuff. I was kind of brought into Twitter, and I just kind of stayed around with it. It's not something I do a lot, but the information's powerful if you look for it. This came through in light of this girl stepping up, and this is a girl who was, I would say, partially homeschooled before she had to go to public school by her mother, and said, no, you don't give that information. Now, I'm telling you, it's tied to a bigger threat, that whether that little girl knows that or not, you need to know that as adults, the adult insects that you all are, the government thinks you are, that when there was a sentiment done by someone in 1690, which speaks right to this. If we're looking for license, if we're looking for permission, and it seems that a lot of people need that permission. There was people that existed before the nation, the United States of America, that were the idea people, that were the centers of thought for how a new nation would be constructed to try and distance itself from the prior styles of rulers. And this statement comes up, is from John Locke in his second treatise on government, chapter 19, page 222. And he says here, and again, listen, because I'm trying to find ways to break us down, that we need permission. We don't need permission. I'm talking in things that are rightfully done, things that aren't imposing on others necessarily, and if they do, you should be asking. Again, I don't know why we don't, have respect for our neighbor to the point that if we're going to do something, we just don't tell them what we're going to do and ask what their problem would be and resolve it. Get it resolved before we make a problem. which these people who are imposing don't ask. They don't go over and ask. It's like all this stuff I hear going over, well, let's help the third world countries. And all these supposed experts, all these educated ones, these academia, run over to the so-called third world nation, and they try to help these people. They never asked. They never asked. They just helped them. Well, certainly the help was by the do-gooders' definition. And so this is what's happening. We're being helped into the stinking abyss, as it were, as I've identified it. That John Locke said back in 1690. If you didn't have this, these are the things that get to me. I would never think about this stuff actually a long time ago before I started looking at this. That we even had to think about it. We've been so propagandized that we have these things, and it's going to be this way forever, and we have nothing to do. That United States was the end-all, be-all. It was the bee's knees of government for people forever. We've really lost what it takes to maintain that, what they call experiment, which they're telling you it was an experiment. It wasn't an experiment. The experiment was whether or not, how long they could get all the people to believe it was more than the experiment, in the experiment that said, let's see if we can extend this on and get them to believe it was real. And when they finally figured out, we'll be ready to stop even that. But John Locke went and said, whenever the legislators endeavor to take away and destroy the property of the people, or to reduce them to slavery under arbitrary power, they put themselves into a state of war with the people, who are thereupon absolved from any further obedience. Now, if you've been listening behind the woodshed, you know I've been talking about we've been in a state of war. Now, he states it succinctly to the point of the legislators' endeavor. Now, we can go on and on about the legislators, but I'm pointing out it's the executive as well in this country. He's talking before the establishment of this country at 1690. Anytime you have a government a branch or people in that branch who endeavor to take away and destroy the property of the people and reduce them to slavery, you understand the connection there. As soon as you take away the right of property or the right to protect it, anybody that was there that thought they had that is reduced to a slavery and an arbitrary power. Understand the power of the statement here. And what he's telling us in this statement that we really needed to keep track of every time. It's kind of this, when I read through this stuff, I see, well, this is the list of things I have in my mind when I'm looking at challenging, or I'm looking at someone who purports to assume an authority. I'd say the very first thing I'm looking at is, well, has he disrespected me in the imposition? First of all, then I look, okay, then by what authority have I agreed to that? Maybe there's an agreement. But if there isn't one, now what has he destroyed in me but my property and my own self, in my right to make the decision to not have him to be coming against me? You have the right of consent. That even means the right of consent of the imposition first. This is how fast this thing really gets exposed. I don't need to go too deep in a lot of this stuff anymore. So as soon as you destroy that property in me, you've now made an arbitrary power that I will not agree with myself. And I don't know about all y'all, but that's me. And for me, it really works. It's not such a hard problem anymore. I don't have to go off, although I can take a problem and work out all the details and look at the path and the strategies and the tactics. I can do all that. But in the first instance, you don't have to do any of that. You can sense it. This girl sensed that there was an arbitrary power being put on her. And that's the property, for her, it was the property of herself. And you see, her trouble was to be sent before another arbitrary power who ultimately could not overcome her consent. And there was too much liability if they forced her to be consenting, like they threw her down on the ground and beat her up and all that. So that would not go. So she was protected in her innocence that way as well. But not so for people in the streets. So, destroy property and people, you reduce them immediately to a slavery status. And it's an arbitrary power. And when they're put there, when we are put there, it's determined to be a state of war. So you see in this statement, and I thank the listener for sending this to me or through the Twitter. Very, simple, little bitty paragraphs really have a lot to say. You take away your remedies, you take away your judiciary, you go extrajudicial, you are in a state of war. How much more consistent can this be than what I've been telling you? And I'm sure I've read this statement long time ago. I don't really remember it, but I'm sure I've read it. You end up going through all this information. It becomes all the stuff you lose in the memory hole that sits here to, at least for me, become the fortification that I believe that I have to be able to start to see this and resist it and then come to tell you this. Again, there's a big transition between reading and thinking you're knowing, and then to try and explain it, whether it is just to expose it or to teach it or to use it in that capacity. It's a whole different thing. So it takes a big jump to have someone come and be a broadcaster in this capacity. Again, anyway, if you're going to, a lot of people tell me, I'm a teacher. I don't know. I know I teach information, but I don't come here for that purpose, but I know that's what the byproduct is. To do that, though, it's a whole mental thing. Your mind has to go through a big jump. And if you have any obligation to it, you realize the importance. I'm just trying to tell you that because there's a lot of positioning transitions that go through our knowledge here. When you go from just reading it to, like I'm doing here over the air, just analyzing this little paragraph of how big a paragraph, the depth and the scope of the subject matter is here. That to tell you that and then have you take it on as a lesson, if you hadn't heard it before and looking at it for the first time, the obligation's on me to try and make sure that I convey that correctly. And that's why I tell you, just don't believe me. I don't say anything I don't believe I'm saying anything that's been wrong, but don't believe me because you have to work this out for yourself. But let me read this one more time. Please listen. When I described it, you see, you destroy property, you put people directly into slavery. It's an arbitrary power, and at that point, immediately, at the destruction of the point of property, which I've been telling you is a key to behind the woodshed and the principles that we've kind of lost. That's so important that the mining law so clearly focuses us on, and to protect it. To be able to see it in such a small way that we can actually grab onto it. Where it's arbitrary, it's really kind of abstract otherwise. That as soon as they take away your property, you put people into a state of slavery. It's not just about them being slaves. They are at that point, but the whole entire condition is a condition of slavery. And guess what? Underneath a limited form of government where that is supposed to be allowing people to function free, that absolves the people from further obedience to essentially the despot slave master, thief, right? This is just a criminal now, right? So you are absolved of all obedience. Now, when I say that, don't go taking this and go and running with it. You got to really think about now how do you apply this. But let me read this one more time and think about this as I just now kind of explained how this appears to me. And you can think up all kinds of things. There's more to talk about, but understand the power behind this. And I'm taking some time on it because it's what I've been about behind the woodshed. The main principle I've been trying to convey is really wrapped up a lot in this. Everything else I talk about gets us here. To identify there are people that will assume arbitrary power, and it comes in such the subtlest of ways. A PE teacher wanting to get a little one's weight in school. That's how subtle, and it comes even more subtle is the scarier part. But here, let me read this. So whenever the legislators endeavor to take away and destroy the property of the people, or to reduce them to slavery under arbitrary power, they put themselves into a state of war with the people, who are thereupon absolved from any further obedience. So think about that. Think about you being able to look at what someone claims to be the law. If you can identify it as an arbitrary power, you're absolved of further obedience. Now, how you respond to that will take many forms. So don't just say, I'm free at last. Thank God Almighty, I'm free at last. I hear John Locke from 860-90. You're going to find out quickly that that's the fact, but now, since then they've had to have wars after wars after wars to try to maintain that an arbitrary power would not be imposed upon people. that it's the same arbitrary power we're finding today on us, because we didn't stand up and rightly object and not continue our obedience in some manner. And you can continue your obedience by what? Simply by the silence of not responding correctly, as I've been telling you as well. So I thought that was a powerful statement. I think it's indicative. This little one here wasn't crickets. She stood up, and I think her mother was behind that, not at the time, but I mean in discussing with her daughter at home what this is. And I'm just explaining to you, those of you that have sons and daughters or granddaughters and grandsons, this is the extension of the school system through the rights of child by family courts and that whole system of child services, and more and more and more. Now you got Obama scare, which case is coming up. I know a Twitter came through about that. That's being possibly going to be determined, a portion of it. And I looked at some of that and I said, isn't this thing isn't this a non-starter from the beginning? Isn't this a fly-out ball, not getting to first base in the first instance? Why are they discussing the terms of this thing? Aren't they void when it was essentially what Robert said? It was a tax. It originates out of the Senate, and the Constitution says it has to originate out of the House. Isn't this thing just a non-starter? That they're even discussing it? That the court's not stepping up to do that? They entertain the terms without saying, hey, wait a minute, this is not validly before the law. So that's my first observation. What you can't do in 140 characters is start to analyze the thing, but if that's the case, if they are analyzing it without that, isn't that evidence to you don't live in a constitutional Republican form of government? And haven't I told you that over and over behind the woodshed? So it won't surprise me that they listen to this. It's for us, though, to say, wait a minute, where did you have the right to even hear this darn thing until it originated correctly? And this, when you look at that, this is again a challenge to the jurisdiction, isn't it? It's a challenge to the authorities. They assume authority to do a tax that now affects everybody and screwed everybody up across the nation. It was planned that way. The Republicans are not free of this oppression. They are one of the agents of that change. They allowed this thing, and so this is how this works. And we don't crickets. I hear crickets. So there's things that stop making sense, and when they stop making sense, I'm asking you to have a word in your mouth and question it, like this. Even this little girl had, and again, she didn't hold up long on the substance of her argument, but it didn't matter. She didn't have to have substance once she decided she just doesn't want to, isn't she? But see, they started to press, and that's where you have to start learning. That type of pressure becomes more and more and more. And she was saying, "Listen, it doesn't make sense what you're doing." And at that point, that you don't need to know, it's none of your business, and you can't show how it is actually, and you can't show how, even if it was, you can show that it was relevant to what you had to do in getting me to run laps. I mean, get me to run laps, I guess then my body to mass index won't matter, will it? I don't know of anybody, unless they had a heart condition, and I don't know of anybody that young that's ever run laps and ever fall down dead. Anybody that's looking any kind of normal. And that might be changing because of the type of food Michelle Obama wants to feed to our little ones in the schools. Have you seen that? Have you seen that garbage? So when it stops making sense, that's your first clue. When it stops making sense, when someone comes up and tries to impose an authority, I don't care what the authority looks like. I don't care how many badges they got on their chest, or how big and fat their hat is, how stiff pressed their uniform, their costume is. It doesn't matter. We have to have more knowledge in us to be able to identify this. So when it stops making sense, I ask questions. And that leads me over to something completely different, but it's something we talked about. Again, science, it wants to be something that they want to tell us is an authority. And it's really, science is just a study of theories and proving out whether those theories can be approached to the point of reality. They don't really point to a reality. That can be changed in the next time we find out a dissonant piece of information. But something's been kind of bothering me. Getting back to that comment real quick. The comment is in a hard place to be. The filet drill returns no samples. And I've been looking at this. One thing, it's like climate change. They got an ideology going about how it was Michael Mann that caused this, but everyone looks past that. But Michael Mann made global warming, how they have this whole theory. it's not even that. It's just an idea. And then we find out it's a religion. So that's the courts have proven that. So I don't even get too far beyond that. It doesn't even get it's a pop-up fly for me right there. It doesn't gets to first base and can't. We looked at this comet, and I just have really struck. Aren't we being fed a line? Remember, I told you a long time ago when I was coming up and wanted to be a scientist and I wanted to go into inner space, I wanted to be an oceanographer, and I told you back in the 70s they were telling us we were going to go into an ice age about this time, and here we come. I mean, for those of you who are living in the top of the country in the east, you're realizing the cold. That's not an ice age, but it's actually cyclical to a condition that's happened. Actually, it'll look a lot this year like it did in 1976. So, but anyway, they had some long-term ideas that we were going to go into a mini ice age again on the historic charts that got completely wiped out by this Michael man-made stupidity called global warming and a man-made cause. But I've noticed something in space science. They've been first of all, at that time early on there was no water in the entirety of the solar system. It was only all here, and so that didn't make any sense to me. But I told you the electric theory of the universe that I was working with early on that really wasn't spoke about said that there should have been water everywhere. If I've got hydrogen coming off the sun, even in our solar system, if I have hydrogen coming off the sun, and it's got an electrical charge, a component to it, and a velocity, and it hits any kind of mineral whatsoever. If it can get to anything in space or on a planet that doesn't have a barrier, and it can get to that component, that element, can get to a mineral that has oxygen in it, we're going to be creating water in the universe. There's just no way not to have it. You know that oxygen and hydrogen combine with enough force. So that early on, it didn't make any sense there was no water in the universe. Well, since then, now water is everywhere. Now, they don't want to really discuss the mechanism. So here we have, and I told you when climate change came on as a science, I said science under the hockey stick, hide to decline, and I've seen an inversion of the hide to decline in economics here. It was on another thing, fascinating stuff. They've actually show you how they hide the increases to show as if they're declines. I said, well, all you got to do is invert that program, and you can show declines where there were show increases where there was declines. It's just math. I mean, it's just inverting, playing with the math. It doesn't mean anything. It's just models, right? We're back to models. That they've been trying to sell this idea, and I don't know really why. I don't look into it, but they've been trying to sell us now that all these asteroids and all these comets are nothing but ice balls. Now they've added a little bit of rock to them. They've been saying now that these ice balls are where all our water. In fact, I don't know how they proved it, but they said that water, supposed science is telling us that water is older on the Earth than the Earth itself. Trying to prove this theory. They've been holding this ideology now is building that life, now came from these comet bodies and asteroids, impacting the planets, and the one that was most conducive happened to be the third rock from the sun. But they've been really pushing this hard that there's ice and water on these moving bodies, these asteroids and comets. That I've just been struck. I can't help but to keep. I'm almost. I mean, I don't know what to say more. I don't know how to get away from this problem. They landed that little lander on that comet, and then they took a drill sample, and they didn't get any samples. And then we're finding out they had to turn their hammer drill at its fullest power. And they don't think that they actually penetrated the surface. So they said, oh, it's ice. It's very cold ice. Again, to me, I'm sensing a problem. Because I know about some hammer drills. We do some of that in mining. You know how hard the substance... It's got to be a lot harder than ice in order for a hammer drill to not go penetrate. Well, okay, so you say, well, it's only weighed a gram. This unit only weighed a gram. It can only put a gram of force. The whole 220 pounds only weighed the weight of a penny. So how much force can you put? Well, okay, I give you that. But those drills are made to thrust in, grab, and push, and hold on at the same time, and penetrate, right? It's not just, it helps to aid, but under its own thrust, it'll actually chip. So I wanted to know, well, how weenie is this chipping device? Oh, also, it's on an outrigger. It's not underneath the unit. So what you have is you have the entire leveraging system to work on as an additional pressure. It's also in about 6 to 12 inches of, they call it dust. We don't know what the hell that is. Now, if you saw the picture, here's my problem. I saw the picture. I didn't see a bit of ice on this thing. It's negative 170 degrees. I saw no ice on this thing. I saw rocks in the picture, the close-up. Didn't see any dust. That I don't know too much more, and I don't have the time, but I went and I found some information. And it's just amazing to me how this scientific elite idea that we know the universe before we've investigated, and we're going to tell you what it's like, and the universe will conform to our dictates. That these asteroids exist, and all the water of our planet came from these asteroids, and that's all you're going to find, and that's where life is too. We're making this meme, this idea. This is our story, and we're sticking to it. But I went and I found out. I want to know, what's the power of this weenie drill? Why can't it go through a hard surface that's called ice? I don't care how cold it is. And what's the perspective? And interestingly, I think it was off of Reddit. You'll get the link. You can find it out. I'm reading down. And they have a bunch of these results numbered. And I get down to result number 15. Surface must be 2 capital M, capital P, lowercase a hard. Now, I went and I didn't understand what that meant, so I had to go look, and it was very hard to find. So I decided I'm just going to look at what do they sell drills on. What's the construction drill power? And I found out that they sell medium-sized construction drills, which are used for concrete and other construction materials. They're medium power. They go from 0.5 MPa to 2 MPa. So this is in the top range of a middle-powered hammer drill. And they use those to go in, if you look at the list, it goes through concrete and all kinds of stuff. And I know the little ones that you get at Harbor Freight, I've understand that even the battery-powered ones will go in with the right bit, will go in through rock itself. So this is not such a weenie drill that's on this device, that's standing on that comet, that they said they didn't even get it to chip the surface. And I have to say, folks, when you start looking at them discussing, and they keep talking about all this ice, all of a sudden now there's not talking about ice in their discussions. Because, folks, I don't think that there's any ice there. I don't think that these rocks are ice. I think science is trying to make a religion of thought about how the universe was created to constrain that to be the proof. That I want you to be aware that I'm seeing some interesting problems with this. I'm fascinated. I think it's fantastic. But I don't know that we're getting the right information to make a decision. And I think that they are being constrained in their own observations. That even though they've got a theory and a model before they got the facts, and just like climate change, science is going to be prostrate before the truth. They're trying to fit their facts to fit their model, not find the facts to identify the model. I cannot believe that there is any ice that this drill went into. And I can tell you, folks, these drill bits, and I'm sure that they sent up the best we could do for what it could do, that it wasn't a weenie. It's not going to last just a couple minutes. That they could not drill into what they called, it must be a hard ice. Well, if you go look at all this go into the science about what ice is fantastic. It's a phenomenal molecule. It makes lattices. It has different phases, but down below 70 degrees, below centigrade, it has essentially the same characteristics. So we're at 170 below. It doesn't change in there against this type of pressure and power. That they could not penetrate, and they claim it must be ice. Then I'm telling you, it's something probably a lot harder, and I mean a lot harder, that they didn't even get samples, folks. They had enough power, but they didn't get the samples. I don't know about you having a dull drill bit or something that's not hard enough to penetrate. You don't get chips at all. You get nothing. It just sits there and turns on the surface. That I just want you to understand again. We're looking at science, I think they're trying, all this authority. And my problem with all this is there's a law that says they use best sciences to make these policies against you. I guess that's the key. That all this best sciences is really a fraud. And the best science available is a fraud that you have to be aware of because it looks to us like it's real. That when they have a 2 MPa drill bit, hammer drill bit, cannot penetrate the surface under a model theory that they say it's ice, you better have a question as to whether or not they even know what the heck they're doing and how phenomenal it really was to put that lander on that comet. Because in the picture, I don't see any ice. And we're talking a lot harder surface than ice or even base rock. It's even stronger than the sandstone. I think they've been trying to produce the idea that exists up there. Remember, their telemetry is saying, it's more porous in the center. And I'm not going to tell you too much more, but when we get into mining, we start finding phenomenal geological things. And I can tell you there's some very hard and porous materials that are not ice. And they're very phenomenal things. And that's another hidden problem. I think they may have, whether they know this or not, they've run onto something else that I won't even talk about. I just won't talk about it. It's too much what we're doing. When I get a little chance to do otherwise, it's what we're doing. There's some phenomenal things that are even on this earth that are science is denying because it doesn't fit their view of the world. And let me show you the next one. I said number 15 was that the surface must be harder than a 2PA. Yes, Grimner said it. But I'm not going to say that it is. I don't know what it is. But yes, Grimner said it. When I looked at the idea that what I was looking at, it would have, if I could have been there to look at it, it almost had the characteristic of coal. And Grimner says it's a big diamond. Maybe it's a diamond in the rough. Maybe it's not. The point is, it's a lot harder than ice. And it's a lot harder than concrete, which is harder than ice. And it's a lot harder than a lot of other things you might find around a construction site where they bore into rock. So you might let your mind kind of extend. And it's supposedly porous. So put that little interesting little tidbit into the mix, and you're going to find some pretty interesting directions that you start to go. But here's what was very interesting, that science, it was almost an indicative condition, that science is trying to force what they found into their predetermined view in models. Because right after it talks about how hard this is, it's above a 2 mph with an exclamation point. The statement is, the comet remains surprisingly bizarre and uncooperative. Are you kidding me, folks? This is what we hear down here. Oh, the experts. Oh, we didn't expect that. Oh, we didn't know. Oh, and it's not cooperating with our models. It's the same thing. It's the same model. I'm saying, look at this. There is something possibly much, much more important and bigger than they even understand. Even if they're in that ignorance, they don't even know what they're looking at. But their whole view here, it says the comet remains surprisingly bizarre and uncooperative. It is what it is. It's an inanimate object for all intents and purposes for our awareness. How does it remain uncooperative? Only to the extent it doesn't match what their models expected. It's a bizarre surprise. How far away our knowledge really is. As I say, look at the wars in Syria and the is and all that as a mirror reflecting us. Here's science again, now out in the 500,000 miles away and closing fast. It has the same earmarks of the stupidity of academia wanting to make itself important and not settling for being childlike and just make a wonder about what it is. They've got to try and push an ideology. And you have to understand that kind of starts to devolve down on us about the amount of energy and money our governments start putting into all this stuff to promote those ideologies. And now we get ourselves over to sustainable development and all that problem about where climate change, we now know, we knew by the court decision it's a religion, and this, and carbon tax, and this and that and the other, and you hear about harvesting asteroids. Folks, you don't go harvest a piece of ice rock, okay? There's another theory, another little point of departure from their theory of ice and rocks in these things. When they sniffed the behind of that, they didn't find just ice, did they? No, and they're looking for organic compounds, aren't they? So, a big diamond, I'd be more leaning toward that, just like Grimner says. It's pretty obvious. There's something a lot harder than water up there. And my whole problem with the whole thing is the lie, folks. You're being lied to. And even if you're not being lied to, it stopped making sense. We can't even know it's not being a lie. And here's why that's important, because I want you all, and I've been trying to do this for years and years, expose you to all the ways that authority comes to make it look like they're not lying to you. Now, does it matter one way or the other? No, they can go ahead and do what they're going to do, and I hope Philae turns back on, and I hope they orient it back in the sun, and all that. I hope all that happens. But I listen to the notice and the notice and the news, they call it, a whole lot different. And doing so has exposed some pretty phenomenal things. And I guess that's also part of it. You get to see a pretty interesting world, existence. It's different than the officialdom says. And that release is a big deal for people. It's a big deal for me. It's a big deal for people generally that I talk to, that understand to start seeing this. That to me, this conundrum, it's an expose. What kind of a mentality says that an inanimate object is uncooperative to their will? Is the problem we have here on earth everywhere, where there is this supposed authority being posed upon you as knowledge, as correctness. That I laugh. The comet became uncooperative, and it was bizarre. It just says we don't know what we're doing up there. We got there, but we don't know what the heck we're looking at. And we're so confined to our religion that we're not going to open up the potential, the possibility that it's something else. Probably because we're afraid that it might actually admit to something that we've been denying all this time. Like they do in climate change. Like they do in numbers of things. Like they do in the immigration, and the denials, and the assumptions of authority they don't have, and no one says anything about it. It's all, to me, almost the same. It just comes by these different subject matters have their own group of parasites attempting to justify their lives. It wasn't good enough that they had to sell this on the idea that they're going to find water and ice rock, I guess, because I don't know that it would have done anything to say anything else. I don't know. It just doesn't seem to me that if they're not willing to see what they see and admit that what they see doesn't fit, and they better sit back and rethink things. They want to see the comet as uncooperative. Do you hear this, folks, in the cops? He was being uncooperative. He acted bizarre. Now he's close proximity. I feared for my life. Do you hear the same thing? I hope you do. The cops do the same thing as these religious people, gang members. Going to impose their do-gooder view. They take a fantastic thing, and then they take it over, and they do their own thing with it, and it may not be reality, and it isn't, actually. So you have this science that's not. And then there is a science. There's actually people that do look at the data and put it into, arrange it so that they can interpret it accurately. And they're called skeptics. If I was to say that that rock had, and I have said it before, and whether I said it on the broadcast is irrelevant, those bodies out there aren't just, I wouldn't even be looking for it either. That's the other thing. I'm looking for it. Prove to me it's ice out there, because I don't believe it. I don't believe these are ice balls. No, there might be some ice with them, certainly. Like I said, just hydrogen protons hitting the oxygen molecules in the rock that's bound up to as an oxide in the mineral will produce water. So, and it'll it'll just immediately freeze. So I'm not saying it's not there. What I'm saying is that it's more, way, way more, and it means a way bigger thing. It's a way different thing going on than we're being told, and our response to it all is constrained by what we see. And so we run around like chickens with our head cut off. We get involved with things that really are not. It's always doom, 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 and there's really no doom. There's us responding to what we're told is going to be doom, and that becomes the problem. In other words, my fear, I told you before, with when they finally admitted to geoengineering, which is just not chemtrails, but geoengineering, earth engineering, when they finally admitted to it, at the UN no less, I told you, be careful, because their models, if their models are screwed up and they're not in reality, and they're spraying something in the atmosphere, good, bad, or indifferent, it was irrelevant. If they change the capture, the absorption of the energy, or the reflection of it, they are going to alter a condition that's going through a natural variance, and that could accelerate where they're going, and it's not going warming. It's going cooling, like we were told in the 70s. That's the harm that you don't understand is on you if you don't. It's not just about that they're doing chemtrails. It's what does it do in the scheme of things that controls your life. Like those of you in the Northeast of the United States of America have found out this week. Climatologists and 30-year cold spell strikes Earth. This is what we were talking about. I was hearing when I was young in the 70s. They've been denying this, and so everyone's been preparing for warming. Not everybody, but people who prepare for warming are not worrying about it, and you need to pay attention here, folks. With nasty cold fronts thrusting an icy and early winter across the continental United States, along with last winter described by anybody that was actual climatologist, not a climate warmist, as one of the snowiest, coldest, most miserable on record, climatologist John L. Casey thinks the weather patterns is here to stay for decades to come. In fact, Casey, a former space shuttle engineer and NASA consultant, is out with a provocative book called Dark Winter, How the Sun is Causing a 30-Year Cold Spell, which warns that a radical shift in global climate is underway and that Al Gore and other environmentalists have it completely wrong, notwithstanding that Al Gore apocryphal is in on the take, and this carbon tax stuff is all a fraud and a scam, and governments are buying into it to put in more regulation, to put more pressure on people to cause their life to cost more. So you can't get heat when you finally need it, when it finally comes down all cool. Because I told you, be careful they're not actually accelerating a condition they actually do know is coming, and that is a cold. So Casey is a long-standing, I think he's more of the scientist side, that comes out. Now he's selling a book, so we don't. When they start selling stuff, I just don't know what's the reason. It could be just to sell a book, right? That's why we have to start paying attention. But if you don't understand that the science that we're hearing, for the most part, that's being promoted by and funded by government, can hurt you, kill you, you need to be aware of that. And it comes under an authority, no different than the European Space Administration has their theory of the universe and denies. It's bizarre and uncooperative, this universe, compared to their perspective of the world. They're not even sitting back and saying, wait a minute, maybe we don't have this thing quite right. That the people that we hear talking about the climate change, high decline, will kill people. And I don't know how many people of those 10 that just happened up there in the northeast of the United States may have been induced to not protect against this yearly condition, actually. That is mimicking sometime back in the middle 70s. Now, on top of all this, more people are becoming more empowered. More scientists are actually coming out. Because, when you come out, it's like anybody who comes out with the truth, you get beat down on. And these people that have their jobs in this field, if they didn't toe the party line, so to speak, if you didn't spout the religion, you didn't promote it and profess it, you got beat down. You're called a heretic. This is no joke. This is not something you mess with. When the powers that be, so called, have the ability to hurt you, you've got to be very careful. But more people are coming out. For those of you that are interested, scientists confesses global warming is a $22 billion scam. Again, as I've been talking for years and years behind the Woodshed, it's just the fact of the failure of science. It's an agenda upon the entirety of our life globally. that people are finally starting to feel of the place that they can come and tell us about it. Now, this is $22 billion a year, folks, being spent on climate change relative matters. This is actually higher than that now. That's just the research money that goes out, not what it's costing us for a scam, a fraud. What do you mean? The government, these are people that say, the flat line of the temperatures, non-responsive to carbon dioxide? Well, the world, it's being uncooperative. How bizarre. That this is deadly stuff, I guess, is the point. This is we're dealing behind the woodshed. I don't know if people appreciate what we're talking about. We're talking about exposing and seeing and watching and maybe not coming back. I don't know yet of the historic. This is historic times. The destruction of a nation. The allowance of the insanity upon the world, and no one said. I got crickets. The killing of people, all based on this these are religions. It takes a lot of courage to step up for these people in professions to start saying this, but they're starting to do it. I'm asking you to pay attention, because there is things out there that we think, it looks like it's authority. It can prove itself. It's got, like, global warming by anthropomorphic modification. It can be proven if you don't know anything else. And this is the deception we live in, that I've been really, this entire time behind the woodshed, I've been trying to expose in all the ways it comes at us. All the ways it comes at us. And I watch how it does it and how people succumb every time, every day. And that bothers me a bit, because I'm looking around and I think I keep my exposure down so I don't have to really, I'm not being affected by too much input. But how much am I failing is always a question to me. For as much as I see, I realize like I told you, go back to the Protocols of the Elders of Zion, look at it not for what you're promoted it is, but look at it as a list of things of how you're frail. Your human nature, so-called, your monster nature, how susceptible, how fallen it is, and how easy it is to control, to understand what I'm talking about here. That's where I learned that. I realized at some point somebody knows me better than myself. And that brings me susceptible to any deceit. And it's not like I'm paranoid, but it's a reality. And so that focused me on why it's important to know, first of all, know, not accept, but know. And then because you know, and this is almost a natural progression, you'll realize you know when you start acting on it. Not because you sit there and just keep listening. It seems to me the real knowledge causes action. You realize you can't just sit there and take it. Whatever that it is. Whatever is. That if you wanted to know, there's a bunch of crazy people out there that are not being constrained, that work underneath these fallacious and religious beliefs, along with all the other things that we hear overtly. Some of us read patents, and some of us understand that, and some of us understand what that means, that you can find along with all this other stuff I've been telling you, that they work under these theories that can kill you when they kind of respond to it. That I think it was Harold Save's website, Chemtrails, the Exotic Weapon. He has for you, if you didn't know it before, a simple place to go get the patents. I'm not going to get into what all we've actually, I've been behind the woodshed. I've analyzed for us by patents and the statements made about aluminum oxide, the wonderful substrate that material is to make all kinds of interesting aerosols, for doing all kinds and changing all kinds of physical characteristics of the environment. I've been through all that. And to remind you, that was started by my observation of another patent and project to find out how fast humic acid destroys aluminum oxide. Now, my mind read that as saying, oh, they're looking at how fast the evidence of the use of aluminum oxide in the environment. They're looking at how fast the evidence is destroyed. That allow me to do a back trail and find all the reasons and all the fantastic things that you can do with aluminum oxide, that it's in the air, that they're using it to do whatever they want. That we then subsequently, and now, if you want to read more to see that it's just to prove to you, it's out there that can be done, whether or not you believe it's going on, whether or not you believe even the UN that says we're doing geoengineering and we're doing it in the skies, is how to alter a region of the Earth's atmosphere, ionosphere, or the magnetosphere. And this is done by NASA. This is pretty powerful dominance, folks. And he's got all the patents listed for you. You'll get the link. If you didn't, so here's my problem with this. All this science that finds the comet bizarre and non-cooperative is the same things that they're putting here on Earth. They work from the same failed philosophies. And as I said before, science at best is just the replication for proof of whether or not an idea is proper. It doesn't necessarily mean reality either, even if it's provable. As we find over and over again with what we do. You can be very close to something, but not have it quite right, and still be close enough it looks like you're right. What we're talking about here kills people when you do it wrong. And there's nobody to stop it. Even if you thought the regulators were there, that they're protecting you, again, it's to a time in our day that we can't let almost anything go. Why we need our numbers to be, as I describe us, the prairie dogs on the mound. And I've asked you to stop being the ones that get plucked off by the eagle. That we need, we have many people around the world, literally, to do this. In particular, the United States, because that's where I'm at, and that's the laws I understand better, and then in particular certain subject matters. That we need all of our eyes on different things anyway. As I've been trying to tell you, grab your spot on the rope and tug. Grab that thing that grabs you. That's the wrong you need to right. Well, folks. You know water, how powerful water is, and you know it's now the new weapon. When you hear this next part of the story, which you may have heard or not, you realize we can't leave it to anybody either. To those of you living down in California, or out in California, wherever your perspective is, there was supposed to be some protection against this. Now, this brings up a lot of other problems that I want to get wrapped up in. I want you to be aware, though, that what purports to be authority becomes an arbitrary power that can hurt you, that you need to know about. And I'm asking if you're affected by this, step up finally. Finally, just do what you can to stop this nonsense. 3 billion gallons of fracking wastewater pumped into clean California aquifers. Errors were made, state admits. Now, 3 billion gallons into a water aquifer. You know, first of all, when I heard that, they want to get on a miner, moving some sediment around, moving to the bottom of a creek, to get a little bit of mineral, whatever that is, gold. Most of the time it's gold. Sometimes they collect up the mercury and the lead. It's not so valuable, but it's still there to be done. That they want to jump all over a whole a group of property owners who have the lawful right to do that, and it's not a harm. It's not a pollution created in a river to move rock that Mother Nature moves every year, and gobs and bunches more than man would ever at this point try. That California's officials allowed oil and gas companies to pump up to 3 billion gallons of oil fracking contaminated wastewater into formerly clean aquifers. Aquifers which at least on paper are supposed to be off limits to any kind of activities. Go look at water law, the water injection pumps, water law in California. There's supposed to be a big old check on where they can and cannot pump water into the ground and pull it out. But in this case, errors were made. If you don't think that there's a plan to depopulate the land, you got to really look at this. Now, this is only going to affect a spot in California, but quite a few miles wide, actually. So most of us, it won't matter. But this is what government's willing to do and willing to allow to be done to you. How do you fix this problem? This is kind of like talks to me about like the GMO problem. Again, I'm a little. I don't know what to say. I don't have an argument. If people want to believe this stuff, they have to believe it. We have our own worldview, and now the term worldview comes up. We have our own worldview. One of the things that's really bothered me about people that were for GMO labeling is you impliedly agree to GMO crop contamination. And this is the same problem. This is a pollutant that gets put into a natural system that destroys the rest of the system. That the government is allowed to do. That, to me, related over to GMO, if you agree with labeling, you're agreeing with crop contamination. In other words, you're agreeing with biological pollution to be incorporated into everybody else's food that can't be changed. That the government allows these risks or not as a plan, excuse me, is really kind of irrelevant. But you see that what purports to be authority, with all the bureaucracy, makes a mistake. I have to look at it beyond, it's not a mistake, it's a plan. And there's also been talk that, the government's taking money behind the scenes from the oil industry to do this and that. You also see the amount of waste for this fracking fluids, how much there's generated. You also realize how much water is involved. Water is a critical thing. And as I look over, I missed it. Those of you that may have been interested, I think the Soyuz has taken off. And if we're on the same time, it may have been in orbit by now already. It was amazing. It lasts only 9 minutes. I just looked over, saw it's 111, and I missed it. So, but anyway, interesting. I keep track of it all. I think it's just fascinating, and also how inefficient our sciences are as well. We're working hard, but we really don't know a whole lot. But it's still kind of neat anyway. Putting yourself on the top of a bomb and lighting the fuse, that's pretty cool. But so the government is willing to take risks with your life. The government's willing to put all this regulation and beat down on other people, on some people that are not doing any harm, and then going ahead and allowing the same industry to cause a problem. Now, I don't know if that was avoidable or not. I don't know how you can actually pump these fluids into the ground, actually, and not have it eventually leak out somewhere anyway. But so that's not here nor there. I don't have that. But they're willing to take risks with your life. As I've told you, for the vaccines and the WHO, the WHO, not the rock group or the owl, but the WHO, World Health Organization, post-marketing analysis. How many people died? How many people got affected? Oh, that's good enough. Keep shoving it out there. How many people got the virus? That's good too. That's what we wanted, actually, as we're finding more and more and more about all these things. The government's willing to take risks, and they don't take action, and you have to step up at some point. For those of you, this next story is the government taking risks and not taking action, and this means your life if you have one of these airbags. It just came up last night. Takata airbag victims looked like they had been shot or stabbed. The government's willing to have a product that kills you in a car, in an airbag is what this is, that goes off like a grenade, the parts of which will kill you. And they don't want to shut this down at all, is what I'm telling you about the government allowing a risk to you. And I'll tell you, they don't really say much in this article, which kind of bothered me. I did find out that they are it's out of Japan, a manufacturer's Takata, if you get the name, Takata, and the one article, in the article they mentioned Acura cars from 2002. How long this has been going on, and there's millions of these things out there, and lots and lots of people who have been injured, and a few have died over this, and you don't hear about it. And you're not hearing about it essentially because of the bottom line. It hasn't really affected enough people, and those that are affected are going to have a remedy to sue, not you, you're dead, your family, that they allow this authority to abuse you. They allow false information to pervade. They allow people that under the color of an authority, a little shingle that the government itself gives to them by their processes, that we agree is authority. And it's a fraud. And it kills us. Now, I mean, how would you like to be in an accident and the bag blow up and your face is gone? I mean, because your device falls apart. It grenades in your face. I want to read more of the story. You'll get the post-production Blogcaster, which I hope you go to. Go to the Blogcaster if you want to see the content. The podcast is there to play, but it doesn't have the content from the RLM website. But I was telling you before about this science being, the standard of your life when the government comes to put this idea in, to give their ruling, the deference they're given to the expertise they have is supposed to be based on best available science. Well, the word of best science available. The word available conditions the whole problem, and it's what these people hide under. What if, as I said before, your science doesn't actually exist? It's all a fraud. There is no science. So fraud takes its place. And the government pays for that. And it has an effect on the policies that the agencies use to come in and degrade your life. With authority. Because now the Supreme Court says they have deference. Why I tell you why we go right after the authority, the jurisdiction first, the authority, and the fraud that they purport to be, whatever it is, justifies their action. Then we find another getting back over to more fraud in science. Scientists confesses he made up polar bear population estimates. Again, as I read that story about the fiscal hiding of the inflation of certain costs against us, they could actually show it a decline. It's just math. They throw enough variables that it's up to the guy wanting the outcome that you see as an answer you think equates to the reality. The greatest scientific fraud in history is slowly but surely unraveling, and the breadth of the corruption revealing is stunning. As any good con man knows, an emotional appeal is necessary. The warmists found their cuddly-looking icon of an endangerment in the polar bear, an animal frequently chosen as stuffed toys for children to hug. That should have been our first clue. Pictures of polar bears on ice floes, presumably doomed to death by drowning as the Arctic ice disappeared, were used to tug on the heartstrings of adults and children alike in order to scare them into willingly hand over the power over to their economic destiny to the global mandarins who would reduce their standard of living. But it was necessary to come up with scientific estimates of polar bear populations that showed them to be in danger. As Matt Barber of Barbed Wire notes, polar bear population became the centerpiece of an effort to find global warming due to the claim that melting polar ice caps would cause the bears to become endangered in the future. As with the hockey stick graph and many other elements of the concocted story, honest scientists working with in the finest traditions of skeptical scientific inquiry started to unravel fuzzy numbers and lies. Dr. Susan Crockford, who publishes Polar Bear Science, in it she documents how a scientist responsible for an alarmist lowball estimate of polar bear population is backing away from numbers that she has been questioning. So here's the point on this story, notwithstanding the fraud. Science, best science available equates to these people as we won't really have to worry about science if we can't find it actually, and the science is what we create. And if that's fraud, then the best available science that we can present and justify in these deference given to the agencies is fraud. That has ruled the day until someone like this doctor steps up and says, hey, wait a minute, let's look at the math. Which, behind the woodshed, we've been laughing. It's not a laugh because we're all being harmed by it. It's laughing about the little polar bear standing on the little last ice cube in the whole of the Arctic. Well, we absolutely know that the Arctic is coming back. It's 50% replaced. The Antarctic is flat, breaking records. To me, I was telling, it came up to Twitter, someone said something about the polar bears also. This came up again on a different aspect. And I said, I don't think that the scientists got the memo that said because of the cold that was coming down to Florida this year, all the polar bears are moving to Florida. To all y'all that are up in North Carolina and Georgia, keep an eye out. There's not going to be no polar bears up in the Arctic. It's too dang cold for them right now. That someone finally took it on to themselves, who also could show an authority to do so, that challenged the arithmetic. And exposes a fraud passing as science. Those that would create whatever they needed despite the reality. And she found it buried in a footnote. Which I always tell people to read for. And the highlights of this footnote says it's important to realize that this range this range never has been an estimate of total abundance in a scientific sense, but simply a qualified guess given to satisfy public demand. Another statement highlighted in the article, consequently, there is either no or only rudimentary knowledge to support guesses about the possible abundance of polar bears in approximately half the areas they occupy. Thus, the range given for the total global population should be viewed with a great caution, as it cannot be used to assess population trends over the long term. Boy, their climate model are written the same way. Here we have it, folks. Science. He's not going to come up and say he didn't come on the record and actually lie, did he? But you didn't get that message, did you? And neither did all your oppressors that are considered to be your representatives everywhere in the government. It's no different in regard, and like I've been telling you, politics has to be removed from production, and I'll bet we produce ourselves right back into wealth pretty quick. It's the same thing as, in fact, I'm looking up and seeing it. Grimner again's on point in the RLM chat. Politics is intermingled with science. Exactly. Science needs to be separate, like producers need to be separate from politics. Those cannot mingle. Otherwise you see these outcomes, especially when the government's sitting at the bottom line problem. What we live under is an economic servitude and don't realize it. We have become property if you didn't understand what your civil rights equally applied actually are. But this lie that purports itself, this fraud that purports to be science, underneath an action plan, a mission for the application of best available science, where there's none available, so they resort to the fraud they fabricated, is a silent extortion upon all our lives, which is your civil rights. Remember, your civil rights are to pay exactions of every kind. 42 U.S.C. 1981, you hear me repeat it. Those of you behind the woodshed all these years, you've been hearing me repeat it. I want you to read it. I want you to understand it. We are living that as essentially as slaves, if we take the status. And if we take the status even by silence, and that's my trouble with the crickets. We're taking on that slavery status as well, on top of it all. I focus kind of like on the weekend war, the weekend war report. Deep behind the woodshed, defended by the Doge of War. Those of you getting over to RLM, look at the Doge of War icon, click on it. If you got some Doge coins, to jump on over and give it over to Grimner. He could probably use it to server costs. Those of you over at ucy.tv, you want to support them, do that. Behind the Woodshed broadcast is now uploaded to YouTube over there, which is kind of cool. Then at WT, worldtruth.org, social network, people get involved. Again, that could be a local place to understand how to go do things instead of just incessantly, putting out new things to look at. We've got to stop, find something, and focus on it, folks. That's all. Otherwise, it just gets beyond us. Just goes beyond us. They take this thing and they use a little polar bear, which is not little. I don't know about you. I've never been up against one. I've seen them in the zoo. I would not think a polar bear is warm and fuzzy. And not when I see pictures of something that's 12 feet tall. It's a machine, and that bear does not scared by that big machine that people are hiding in, and it stands up and it looks in the window. They're 12 feet above the ground. I don't think that's an animal that's going to be warm and fuzzy. And see what they've done in our psychology here. The scientists did that. The science of social engineering, isn't it? Also, it's one of those things that I've just been against completely. Couldn't find any probable cause for it. Found all the reasons why it shouldn't happen. Didn't deny it couldn't always, but wasn't the prevailing cause of Fukushima and the radiation. Well, we got the facts apparently. Again, see, science is prostrate before the truth. We don't even know what's the truth either. But I'll go with this one. It made a whole lot more sense because that's what I thought it was initially. Again, I did not become a scientist in oceanography. I wanted to. I had a lot of knowledge about it, but life does its things, and I didn't go there. So I have an affinity for things in the ocean. And so these stories keep popping up that I keep paying attention to. Virus. Remember the blue-green algae, remember the stupidity virus that half of us have. Virus implicated in massive die-off of North American starfish. So while the fearmongers and even the so-called alternative media was all talking about the melting starfish from Fukushima, and I told you that's impossible. It can't be happening. It's certainly not that way. And that there was other reasons why this might be going on. Well, now the virus is implicated. That's not a proof either. But it certainly isn't speaking to Fukushima, is it? And I know there's all of y'all that might say, oh, well, but Fukushima caused a reduction in its immune system. Well, it doesn't work that way, so it doesn't matter. Scientists investigating a huge die-off of starfish along North America's Pacific coast have identified a virus they say is responsible for calamitous wasting disease that has wiped out millions of the creatures since it first appeared last year. So, they've got a cold. I guess they need a vaccine. But it's not Fukushima. It's not the scientific models that said that irradiation was coming our way. That was to get you all excited. I told you that was to hide the existing radiation that was already here, whether it's natural or man-made. And it was a lot. And you've seen that be the truth over the years. So, again, what appears to be the truth and appears to be wholesome has been reduced to religion, has been reduced to crime, has been reduced to worse than that. And I'm just here every week to identify it in all its ways, hoping any of this will grab you. One thing grabs anybody, and they just decide to grab it with both hands and tug until they tug it down. They tug down the authority that it shows, and we get beyond it. We get past it. It's no longer an obstruction to us to start thinking a lot better, because we are that close. We were talking about the mining district. We had a meeting. We had our mining district meeting here this last Friday, and we're going through some of what we're doing. And it's just a matter of people coming together to work. Those of us that are working on this, we're seeing how close it really can be. We just need just a few more. Really, ultimately, we need all of us looking out for each other in the place we have expertise to go, or we develop the expertise to go and be the looker, the watcher, then the solver of that problem. We were supposed to remain vigilant. Now, that's been adulterated since the 2001 9/11. About what vigilant is. Now we've transplanted it over to the government, which were the criminals. We were supposed to maintain the vigilance, and I'm telling you now, we're here 10 years later or longer, exactly where that's been. I've been saying it, since I've been broadcasting, but I mean, to these last 2 years have really focused us on where it's at. And it's focused us on things that we can do. We in the world are doing answers. We just don't embrace that. Here in the United States, where we should have, when the banks got too big to fail, and jail and all that other stuff, we didn't rise up. Yet there was an example for us done a couple years ago in Iceland. Again, there's another, it's a financial ideology, a financial religion that's going on. That's all made up, and we have faith in it. We're the faithful in engaging with it, right? When we deal in their paper and their derivative paper and their scams and their fixations and all that other stuff. We're dealing with it. But see, Iceland went after the problem. And I told you they have some problems. They had a bunch of people write a constitution guided by an attorney, and I found some problems with holes in the future that will be able to be used by the few that know will be manipulating that. But right now, they got the force and the momentum of the people in the current contemporary idea, and the momentum that the people decided they weren't going to have it anymore. Let's say what a sovereign actually does. The sovereign people actually stepped up. And so we get this over time. It starts to happen. You know they've had other bankers jailed, but here, former head of Iceland's Landsbanki jailed for role in 2008 crash. That's about all I want to read out of that. I want to let you know that people got together and made accountability, if nothing else. No, it doesn't solve their problem, but they went together, created a constitution, reformed their government, said, hey, these banks, this is unconscionable contracts, we're not going to do it, you all were criminals, we're going to go after you all. We'll do economy ourselves, and I haven't heard that they've been made one wrong move yet at the point of the economy. Best thing they could have ever done. And what do we do here in the United States of America, having more power? We rub our feet together and fret and hunker down because we're too afraid. Crickets. So more evidence of what can happen when you really want to. And that's my problem, because I know it's possible. These people are proving it to me. What I'm telling you is what we need to do as a people, and I know a lot of people don't want to talk about that. We'd rather believe what we were told. The social engineers told us we lived in a free society that would be taken care of, and we forgot to listen to the detail. That we had to be vigilant. Those people were actually telling us the truth and not committing frauds and other extortions. And then they made extortion the law. You ever thought about it that way? They've made extortion the law. Long before. And where is that, folks? You hear me say it all the time. For those of you that heard, I hope you just rattles right off your mind. Even if you get the numbers wrong, it doesn't matter. As you know, I've made a misstatement on those numbers a couple times. But what is it? And for all that haven't heard before, what is it? I mean, you should be able to know. It's what they tell you is something grand and great in your hands, and really it's not. It's their ability to beat you down. In fact, two of the provisions are you get to enjoy pains and punishments, isn't it? How slick these people were. Title 42, Section 1981 tells you all about your extortion-based law. So it's not surprising that they just removed all law and now they're just going to be a big despot because no one said anything. Crickets! They responded. The crickets, they enjoy the crickets. Do you enjoy the crickets when they're out? I do. I like listening to all the different variations of crickets that have temperature gauges in them. I can tell what temperature is. It's kind of neat. I can kind of tell who's speaking to who. No, not the WHO, not the World Health Organization, or the owl, or the rock group. But the government loves crickets, and I like them too. Only we like them for different reasons, and theirs is more scary. So it takes a people to step up to help each other. I say watch each other's back. Be vigilant about that. We all can't know all the problems that are out there, but we can know one thing. And as I told you, for us, I just happened to be that picking the mining law happens to be a very comprehensive subject matter. I mean, it affects, there's things almost in every aspect of our life inside the mining law that it kind of made this job a lot bigger than I had originally thought. But still, as I said, you can take on more than you thought. You just prepare yourself and then persist. It's a bit of work, and I'm not by myself. If it wasn't for people helping me out, so that I can focus on this, I couldn't even do it. But see, I'm at a different level. I'm doing literally 100% time. I come out of bed, I start working on it. When I find myself laying on my keys, I fall over to the bed, and that's my life essentially, based on except for a couple of meetings and then phone calls. I have people that have allowed me to do that. Without their help, I could not do this. So I'm a special case that way. However, I always see that we have more time in our days to prioritize better, that we could do something. And that's all. I'm asking you to find that little bit that you find that you have an expertise to identify. You know, there's things I just can't identify because I just don't know about it. That people that are even trained in the system actually do know, and then they learn the truth, and then they say, oh, that was a fraud to me. Maybe that's why, that's what grabs them up. But it takes all of us watching each other's back and watching out for the rest of us. And this emanates out like a ripple out as we hear looking at other people's. And so we have a secondary, went to Iceland, and then we found out, you know, what they did. People actually taking action, making their voice known, not being crickets, actually overtly at least starting to take action. And we find out here in Spain, over there in Europe, Spain Parliament at least symbolically recognizes Palestine. So we're seeing a tide. This is a fascinating change happening right in our own witness internationally, where nations are stepping up in international recognition, not being silent. Even though this is only symbolic, it's a start. And you know, I've really been against what I saw as a genocide. One group of people that had no better right than another group of people just killing each other. I don't get that. And I don't get how the world was able to being allowed to set that up and allow it to continue. And I don't even have it on my board, but I don't know if you all heard. Do I have it? I don't know that I have it. You know, when you get to the UN and Russia promotes that they want to make a resolution to stop the promotion of Nazism. Now, I'm not going to get on the political side of all this. And then the United States and Great Britain and Canada and anybody else comes out against that idea, that you don't want to promote a dictatorship upon people, at least as we conceive it, as symbolized by Hitler. The United States just voted against that. They want to now promote a Hitler-esque government in the Ukraine. Isn't this a fascinating dynamic, in the least? And I hear crickets to that, about our role in wanting to support something that people in the United States of America use, that the government itself wants to vilify. Yet when it came down to the rubber meeting the road, talk became cheap. The government uses this against you. The United States government was not willing to stand up to say that what is the kind of thing that is symbolized by a Hitler would be stood against. They will not stand against that as the United States. And this goes along, kind of triggers my mind to tell you, remember, I told you this before, that the United States Constitution allows privateering, which is essentially or official pirating, which shows us why and the United States cannot enter into anti-piracy agreements because of that provision. It's a constitutional agreement to show you there's other provisions going on that allow for a government to be a criminal, notwithstanding the despotic angle of it. But the United States government, where it's purported to fight against Hitler for the purpose of Nazism, and the hollow hoax comes up here as well, will band together with Israel and Israel probably stayed silent on that, but you know that's all together, Israel and Britain and Canada and the United States, to not stand up against Nazism. Now, so what has changed? But nothing, if you really look at the truth behind the reality. It's all been a setup for our consumption. And we've heard crickets. And this is now generational. Our sedentary position, our acceptance of the costume of authority, and the power that gives to that criminality. Extortion was legalized, and nobody said anything. I don't get that. Hypocrisy rules the world, and it's a planned chaos. As I told you, they use the chaos. That's the plan. They can control people with the chaos. In other words, they get you divided. And they keep lying to you, and they keep giving you the frauds under the color of science, and all this nonsense. They produce science as really just essentially a religious agenda. The hypocrisy is over and over, and no one says anything about this, because here the hypocrisy is underlying some bad motive and bad action, actually, usually when we look at this, and we see it again here. U.S. armed Syrian opposition surrenders to Al-Qaeda. How is that possible? Al-CIA, are you kidding me? armed Syrian opposition was not al-Qaeda, that was not al-Nusra, which was not, Al Gore? Oh yeah, Al-Qaeda, al-Nusra, and Al Gore, right? The same, these are the terrorists of the world. This is a consolidation of power by the United States on something it's claiming it doesn't do. No different than they would not undertake to stop what we understand to be a Nazi imposition in Ukraine. Impliedly, now we wonder why they even fought the Nazis of Hitler's Nazi in Germany. These people will try to get you to believe that a Syrian opposition group, those moderate rebels that don't exist, that were all funded by the United States or those allies of the United States, as we've gone through over and over and over, somehow surrenders to Al-Qaeda. You can imagine, I'm sure is right on the tail of this. Absolutely. And the fraud continues one after the other. To the point of the ridiculous, as we move on, and it would be a joke if it wasn't really so serious. And if I couldn't reflect it back to us in the States against each of us as people, the hypocrisy that runs, the destruction of these principles. All the time, this unqualified says the U.S. upholds core international principles, claiming and charging Russia against Russia that you don't need to invade other countries. And this little report, Insight from SOTNet, just fascinating what this unqualified one and what his administration and these governments, these Zio West governments do. And I hear crickets on that as well. As reported here, your faithful Russian correspondent was minding his own business when he accidentally clicked on the link which he naively thought was a picture of a funny cat. Instead, it was a New York Times article. There is no way to prepare for what you are about to see. And he points out this little statement. The United States, the unqualified one, which is Mr. Obama, said was very firm on the need to uphold core international principles, and one of those principles is you don't invade other countries. The Russians, he said, were supplying heavy weapons and financial backing to separatists in Ukraine. There's a comment here in red I won't read over the internet. Can you believe this is coming out of the government out of Washington, D.C.? I don't even know what more to say. This is what we are crickets on that has to stop. These people are criminals. These are ongoing war criminals that have the apparent power to give immunities. Now, how that's not a felony to do so under color of authority, I don't know. It stopped making sense. How do we get to the point where he says we're going to uphold core international principles when I've read the part in the memo issued under NDAA that says we're going to abandon all international principles? This is a criminal. This is all I can tell you. I don't even know what more to say about that I hear crickets. It flabbergasts me. That, again, all in a stream, coming up. What I've been telling you about jurisdiction and authorities and being sovereign and standing up for yourself, and Putin's doing that, even though I may or may not agree with what he does as far as his nation's concerned for him and his people. That you respond is the most important thing. And that you have to challenge jurisdiction and authorities up front. Where this guy, Obama, the unqualified one, says that you got to uphold certain core international principles, where they just made a memo that said that they're not going to observe any. And you just destroy the whole construct of jurisdiction as far as even Putin identified clearly in his speech, saying now only the biggest nations that can protect themselves have that right. We see another purported jurisdiction stepping up in an interesting way, which I thought was really telltale, give you another answer on what we do. Challenge jurisdiction. Catholic Church says federal court has no jurisdiction over it because of religious freedom. Now, it used to be a different answer, which I've watched this challenge. The court used to be immune absolutely, and then the government created a way to get at it somehow. And I think that may be the way that the church entities were established in this country, which allowed them to be had. Again, if you understand about the taxation and the proper way to have a church in the United States that's immune, you don't put them underneath 501c3. That's a state church. You file it under a 508 provision, that means that you're a different entity, you're a foreign entity in a certain status. That the church is coming in with this, but see, they condition their own argument by saying because of religious freedom, pursuant to a contract, if you will, the Constitution. But here they are doing what you're supposed to do if you're a sovereign. Someone knocks on your door or sends you a message saying you got to show up before another authority. You say, well, wait a minute. You don't have authority you don't have any jurisdiction to make that request. Now, the interesting problem is you have to go to that jurisdiction to tell them that. But notwithstanding that problem, the Catholic Church, which I've told you is no friend to anybody, which has their own problems, is identified as a separate jurisdiction, actually has its own country. Now, the entities created in the United States may not be as removed, but as the church itself, it might. And it's actually did the very first thing. I just wanted to show this as an example. That was the first argument it made to the federal court. Now, again, I could read this stuff, but I want you to read it. I need you to see the rules, the words, to see what they're doing. When you see the words, I was telling you, see the standards written down, and you write those down as notes to yourself, you start realizing what words you need to use. If we didn't have any other example. This is probably one of the highest examples of a jurisdictional battle I can know of in the world. And if you know the international documents, you'll know why. That an independent, separate entity, not only politically, but I don't even know what to say. It's not a physical jurisdiction either. So it's not even here, actually. Is challenging whether or not another jurisdiction can reach across and grab it. And this is the commingling that happened back in the 1100s over the corporation soul, when the king said, but what of my stuff? And they had to go to the Catholic Church. The secular world had to go to the Catholic Church, the church authority, church law, to find the resolution to the problems that the secular law had created for itself, underneath this idea that there's a despot that can rule everybody. It's a fascinating study if you start looking at this from jurisdictions and what's going on and who had what authority, who was the guidance, and who continues to be the guidance, and who continues to be the players. Remember, I told you this Catholic Church is the head of which is the Green Pope, which advises the financial world and tries to influence them to do the right thing. Otherwise, they commit sinful acts to their eternal condemnation. You see how powerful this starts to work if you're in the belief system that way. But it is, in fact, a system that's set up underneath the skin of it all. That this church is saying, hey, federal court, you got no authority over us. That I'm pointing out to you is your first argument. You have no jurisdiction. And in the United States, there's supposed to be a paper application that shows how you got brought in. How you're being affected. How did you become the citizen of the United States subject to the jurisdiction thereof? How did you become that? How did you become put into a state of extortion? How did you get put into a state that made extortion lawful? And for me, more importantly, once you hear that, why do we... I should have been seeing people destroying that system. I should have been coming late to the party, not wondering why I'm hearing the crickets. Now, we destroy that. Again, that's a big thing to destroy it. We destroy it locally. That's how we start to do that. Again, it's us huddling up and saying, hey, listen, this is what we found. And that's a big thing out there to beat down all at one time. We're not going to be able to do that. Let's get more people. Let's tell more people. Let's get more. Let's find the effect of that here, and we'll stop it here. And as we do that, we learn more, learn better, and we start to address this, and we start to chip out what the cancer that has been formed up around us. And if you find the core areas, you can actually chip out quite a bit. Your life is being conditioned by what you don't know. And this is the thing. Where do you know? This is the hardest problem in our human frailty, as I found in through the Protocols of the Elders of Zion. Looked on it more as a list of human frailty than it is the nonsense I hear being talked about. It was much more powerful to me, speaking to me that way than it was as I hear people use it as a divisive device. To understand that was a list of things in that document in a way, and analyze in its application that it was a way. It was the plan on how I myself could be defeated, and in consequence, everybody can be defeated. That how do you solve the part that the information that you don't know? Part of the way you solve that is you become inquisitive and curious, and you go out and you seek it. That helps it. And you start really applying what you know, and the more application, the more experience gives you more insights. And I told you, as you get more involved, things come to you that would never, ever have come to you. That's how we regain that power. That we aren't living in the sense of ignorance, and not cluelessness either, because it's almost a point, you're clueless to it is the most dangerous thing you can be, even though you're intending to know. How do you know what you don't know is the biggest problem. And then we're acting in absence of that knowledge is another way we get defeated. And it's protected by this reliance on the system of authority that's supposedly certified to give us the knowledge. That it's really a shocker to hear some of the truth, the reality of the reality, in how things are done. The how of the things that are done becomes a major issue. Because I didn't know something that I just learned here this week. Again, certified to us as being an authority, certified to be good and wholesome. We had heard that wheat wasn't a GMO product. It just hadn't been done. Now we've had hybridized wheat, and I've told you I'm involved in that as a young guy through my grandfather. He used to hybridize food, open pollinate plants to find a better fruit for people to eat. And that's a man-handled modification of genetics, but not by direct interjection of the cell. It goes through the natural processes of reproduction. And you're essentially looking at the basic biology of looking for the best offspring that can reproduce itself over time. That's a long and slow process, I'll tell you that. But it's there. And so there was that in wheat. What we didn't understand is we were actually denied to us the knowledge that there was actually DNA GMO wheat, and that got out. That little secret was by accident. You remember that story in Oregon that some guys sprayed a field in the margins, and a wheat plant continued to grow, and they had it checked out, and they said, "Oh, that's a GMO modified wheat that's not supposed to exist." And that started a whole big fiasco with Monsanto, and they claimed that another company planted it out there to blame them, and then the whole thing, the cat was out of the bag. They're all doing it. That something came up that if you don't know, it can be a very, very serious thing. It can happen. It happens to you, all of you that eat wheat products at all. And it also speaks to those that now can't eat wheat products that thought wheat gluten was a problem. Because I didn't know something that I learned in this next story. The reason wheat is toxic, it's not gluten. Now, I'm not going to say in absolutes. I'm going to tell you, here's an idea for you to investigate, because it made a lot of sense to me. The stories became far too frequent to ignore. Emails from folks with allergic or digestive issues to wheat in the United States experienced no symptoms whatsoever when they tried eating pasta or vacation in Italy. Confused parents wondering why wheat consumption sometimes triggered autoimmune reactions in their children, but not at other times. In my own home, I've long pondered why my husband can eat the wheat I prepare at home, but he experiences the negative digestive effects eating even a single roll in a restaurant. What indeed is going on with the wheat? I'm trying to cut through here quickly. There's so much to read in this. Oh, I want to read it, but I don't want to read it. I want you to read. I want you to see for yourself. And let me just get to the chase. I'm just reading. There's so much to read here. I'm not going to have time. What I didn't know, and what I don't know that many people understood, is how they process wheat prior to harvest. And apparently, right prior to harvest, right at the time it's time to harvest, they spray these fields with Monsanto products so that they will be easier to harvest. They spray the fields with Roundup right before they harvest, and apparently it allows for the kernel doesn't have to go through a drying and lightening process, so they actually get more weight as well. It's also apparently easier on the harvesting machines, because once you spray the plant, it allows it to get softer. And there's a whole other list of things that why they spray the crops with Roundup herbicide right before they harvest that is still on the grain when they go to process it, that I didn't know about it, that people respond to and react to, that they didn't know about, that I'm noticing more and more. It's harder and harder to find. I did notice this part. I'm a little sensitive to looking at this stuff. It's harder and harder to find foods that you don't respond to. If you're sensitive to it, you can see. You just don't. You eat something, you just don't feel quite right. Or on the other hand, you respond pretty handily. You get, you get inflamed stomach and all that other stuff just by eating something. And we don't put it together. I didn't know that they processed wheat like this. And if you don't know that that's the way they process the wheat, and you look at your label, it says no GMO. In this case, it's not, because it's not dying when they spray it with Roundup. They actually use the fact that the plant dies by being sprayed with Roundup to actually use for the harvesting potential. It doesn't say GMO, but you don't really look at it. They don't put the Roundup, which has been certified to be gone in a few hours or days, whatever it is they say. They don't put that on the label. So labeling is irrelevant at this point. But did you know that they were spraying wheat with glyphosate? I didn't, and I thought that was a danger enough that you needed to know about it. And you can, again, make your decisions, folks. I mean, this is up. Once you're told, I'm like I keep telling you, I'm cursing you. In a way, there's no excuse. And as you start seeing this, it becomes kind of oppressive to think that our food supply really is feed. It's what they're giving us. It's not wholesome. And why it becomes so much more important to really start getting into understanding and growing your own food at some level. So, again, knowledge is not the power. Knowledge gets us on the point where we start to realize there's something wrong, and then we have to act, which knowledge in application becomes our power. And I think we're down to one last report here for all y'all that are coming through the flu season. And there's now a question, what we're told, right? What we're certified to, what the costume of authority, what we give the power over to the people, the government to do. Are flu vaccines risky for senior citizens' lives? Was a report. They're doing a study. The CDC estimates 90% of flu-related deaths occur in people 65 years of age or older. And it's at least a wash. And I can tell you it's probably not. It's probably worse. That they're finding out that maybe senior citizens better not be taking these things. That as we move into flu season, again, another evidence. How about if you stop adulterating the sanctity of your body and stop putting these government-sanctioned color of law, color of authority helps in your body. CDC admits flu vaccine does not work for where they have an influenza outbreak on a fully vaccinated Navy ship, to show you that that's not necessarily what you've been told anymore about these vaccines. And you make the call, folks. This is all I can do is bring it to you and show you that it's out there for you to research, and then again I'll put it on the blogcaster. Put it in a place that you can find it and you can return to it. So thank you for tuning in today. Again, support everybody you can that's bringing the word out. markonthebeast@yahoo.com, markonthebeast@yahoo.com to send me an email. Contribute to Great Intelligence Matrix as I pull this together. Give me what information you'd like to hear or what I can help on, and I'll see what I can do to pull it together. I only go along as I make this up. While I hear crickets, folks, is all I can do is just hope that someone passes the podcast on to someone else that might need it. If you need particular information, markonthebeast.yahoo.com, I'll get to it. And so support your local people that are giving the notice out, sending the broadcast. Your hosts, support them. Again, click and tell and email and all that stuff is a great help. So thank you very much, and we'll see you next week. Hopefully, technical difficulties willing and the universe allowing it all. You take care of all yourself. Watch that cold and watch that you just be healthy, folks. Big thing.
Well, that's another lesson. I hope with today's information you can take it to those that misbehave. From behind the woodshed, leaving his mark on the beast, this is Hal Anthony. Till next time, journey with purpose.
So that's what opening up a can of whoop-ass feels like.